The millionaire's mother got thinner every day, until her son came home and found out everything. She withered in silence, surrounded by eyes that seemed caring but only controlled her. The food tasted strange, the medicines made her worse, and the days slipped by like a blur. No one noticed, until her son returned home and saw what time had tried to hide. And there, among switch bottles and false smiles, the truth erupted. His mother was being poisoned inside her own home.
The sun rose lazily over the manor house on Primrose Lane, one of those grand old homes that resisted the passage of time with dignity. Mrs. Eleanor Mendelssohn, at 78 years old, observed the garden from her bedroom window. The light bathed the rosewood furniture, silent witnesses to decades of family history. The former piano teacher no longer recognized the weight of her own steps. In recent months, her body had become a strange territory, increasingly fragile. "Mrs. Mendelssohn, it's time for your medicine," announced Lucy Matthews, entering the room with a glass of water and a pill in her hand. At 42, Lucy was the partner of Philip, Eleanor's only son. She had moved into the manor house 3 years earlier when their relationship became official. "I've taken so much medicine today, my dear," Eleanor murmured, touching her forehead with pale fingers. "I'm feeling dizzy again." "It's for your own good," Lucy replied, with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Philip would be worried if he knew you were resisting the treatment." Her son's name always worked like a key. Eleanor accepted the pill without further protest. Philip Mendelssohn, a 45-year-old engineer, spent most of his time traveling for work. He trusted Lucy completely to care for his mother during his absences. "Rest a little afterward. Lunch will be late today," Lucy said, adjusting the curtains to block some of the light. "I need to go to the market." When the door closed, Eleanor felt the weight of the silence. Something inside her screamed that she was not well, but the words were lost in the labyrinth her mind had become. She tried to stand, but the dizziness sent her tumbling back into the armchair. She closed her eyes, searching for balance, and confused images danced behind her eyelids. In the kitchen, Jane Oliver, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for over 20 years, was preparing breakfast. At 53, Jane knew every corner of that house and every one of Mrs. Mendelssohn's habits. In recent months, she had watched with growing apprehension the changes in her employer's health. "Mrs. Matthews, Mrs. Mendelssohn barely touched her dinner again last night," she commented, while Lucy organized her handbag. "She has no appetite. It's normal at her age," Lucy replied without looking up. "The doctor already explained." Jane swallowed the words she wanted to say. There was something strange in the glances Lucy cast at Mrs. Mendelssohn when she thought no one was watching. A mixture of impatience and something deeper, more unsettling. "I'll leave some chamomile tea for her. She always liked it," Jane said, drying her hands on her apron. "Don't worry, I'll prepare it myself when I get back. You have a lot to do today." Lucy picked up the car keys. "Oh, and don't leave Mrs. Mendelssohn alone in the kitchen. She could hurt herself." When Lucy left, Jane quietly went up to Eleanor's room. She found her asleep in the armchair, breathing heavily. In recent months, the elderly woman's body had wasted away. Her clothes, once perfectly fitted, now seemed to belong to someone else. Her face, once full of life, showed a constant pallor. "Mrs. Mendelssohn," she called softly. The elderly woman opened her eyes slowly, as if each eyelid weighed pounds. "Jane? What time is it?" "Almost 10. Would you like some coffee?" "I can't eat anything in the morning. I feel nauseous," Eleanor confessed, "and everything has such a strange taste lately." Jane frowned. "Since when have you been feeling this?" "I don't know for sure. The days are all mixing together in my head." Eleanor tried to stand up again, and this time Jane supported her. "Yesterday I fell in the bathroom. Lucy said it's because of my age, that I need to get used to my limitations." Those words bothered Jane. Until 6 months ago, Mrs. Mendelssohn walked in the garden every day, watered her orchids, and played the piano on Sunday afternoons. That same morning, Philip called to check on his mother. Jane answered the phone in the living room. "She's fine, Mr. Philip, but don't you think she's losing weight very quickly?" Dr. Reynolds said, "It's normal, Jane. Age takes its toll," he replied from the other end of the line. "Just keep an eye on her so she doesn't fall." When she hung up, Jane stood still, phone in hand. She remembered the previous week when she had found Mrs. Mendelssohn locked in her room without water, saying that Lucy had left and forgotten to leave the door unlocked. In the middle of the afternoon, Lucy returned with several bags. There was a different sparkle in her eyes, a renewed energy. "I bought that orange cake Mrs. Mendelssohn likes," she announced, handing a bakery box to Jane. "Prepare a special coffee for her." The gesture, seemingly kind, contrasted with the dietary restrictions Lucy usually imposed on her mother-in-law. During the afternoon coffee, Jane watched as Lucy insisted that Mrs. Mendelssohn eat a generous slice of cake, while commenting on how worried Philip was about the medical expenses. "Your medications are very expensive, Mrs. Mendelssohn. Philip is working himself to the bone to keep up with it all," Lucy said, distractedly stirring sugar into her coffee. "He's thinking of selling the manor house, you know. He says it's too big for the three of us." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Sell the house? But this place has been in the Mendelssohn family for over 100 years. "Times change," Lucy replied with a cordial smile. "And old houses are a lot of work. Imagine if we could live in a modern apartment, without so many worries." Jane noticed how Mrs. Mendelssohn's hands trembled as she set down her cup. Deep in the elderly woman's eyes, there was something beyond the usual confusion. There was fear. Later, when Lucy left for a book club meeting, Jane found Mrs. Mendelssohn in the old study, leafing through family albums. "Jane," the elderly woman whispered, a momentary lucidity in her eyes. "There's something wrong with me. It's not just my age. I have periods of clarity, like now, and then everything gets confusing again." "Do you think the medicine is too strong?" Eleanor hesitated. "I don't know, but I have strange dreams. I see Lucy going through my things, opening drawers at night, and when I wake up, I'm not sure if it was a dream or reality." Jane sat down beside her. "Do you suspect something?" "It sounds crazy, but sometimes after I drink the tea Lucy prepares, I feel worse, much worse." Eleanor gripped Jane's hand with surprising strength. "And yesterday I heard her on the phone talking about a sale, about how it would be easier without me." A shiver ran down Jane's spine. Before she could answer, they heard the front door open. Lucy had returned earlier than expected. "We'll talk more tomorrow," Jane whispered, quickly putting away the photo album. That night, lying in her small room at the back of the house, Jane couldn't sleep. Mrs. Mendelssohn's words echoed in her mind. Was the old woman really confused, or was something more sinister happening in that house? In any case, a certainty grew in her heart. Something was not right in the Mendelssohn manor house, and its stone walls held secrets that were beginning to surface. The next morning, Jane arrived at the manor house earlier than usual. The Bath sky was still dark, and the mist typical of winter in the rolling countryside enveloped the property like a shroud. As she prepared coffee, her mind was at work. 20 years of serving this family had given her not only knowledge of the house but also of its inhabitants. Mrs. Mendelssohn had always been a strong, lucid woman, passionate about music and literature. The transformation of the last few months was too drastic to be merely the result of age. Jane decided to pay closer attention, to observe patterns, schedules, changes in behavior, both in Mrs. Mendelssohn and in Lucy. Her instinct told her that something was very wrong under that century-old roof. "Good morning, Jane. You're early today," Lucy's voice sounded from the kitchen doorway, making the housekeeper jump. "Good morning, Mrs. Matthews. It's market day. I thought I'd go early to get the fresh vegetables," she improvised, trying to hide her nervousness. "Excellent idea," Lucy replied, opening a kitchen cabinet. "I'll prepare Mrs. Mendelssohn's tea. She had a rough night." Jane watched discreetly as Lucy opened a small tea box. She noticed it wasn't the same box of chamomile tea that was kept in the common cupboard. This one came from a small drawer that Lucy always kept locked. "Would you like me to make the tea? I have the water hot already," Jane offered. "No, thank you. Mrs. Mendelssohn likes a special preparation," Lucy replied, with a polite smile. "You can continue with your chores." That same morning, Philip called to say he would be back in 2 days. Lucy took the call in the living room. away from Jane's ears, but her tone of voice changed noticeably. There was a note of tension that didn't match the news of her husband's return. While cleaning the hallway, Jane overheard fragments of the conversation. "Of course, darling, and yes, she's getting more fragile." "The doctor?" "Yes, he's coming tomorrow." "No, don't worry, I'm taking care of everything." "The estate agent?" "We'll talk about that later." Estate agent? Jane remembered the previous day's conversation about selling the manor house. The property had been in the Mendelssohn family for generations. Philip had always spoken with pride of the house's history, of the memories it held. Why sell it now? At noon, when she brought lunch to Mrs. Mendelssohn, she found her sitting in the armchair, staring out the window with empty eyes. "Mrs. Mendelssohn, I brought your food," she called gently. The elderly woman turned slowly, as if emerging from a deep dream. "Jane, what time is it?" "Noon. Are you feeling all right?" "I'm confused," she replied, passing a trembling hand over her forehead. "This morning I had that tea Lucy makes, and I haven't been able to organize my thoughts since." Jane moved closer, speaking more quietly. "Can you eat by yourself, or would you like some help?" "I think I can manage," Eleanor replied, reaching for the plate, but her fingers trembled so much that the fork clattered to the floor. "Let me help," Jane said, sitting beside her. As she helped her eat, she asked casually, "Did you know your son is coming back?" Eleanor's eyes lit up for a moment. "Philip, when?" "In 2 days." "Thank God," Eleanor murmured. "I need to talk to him before I forget what I want to say." That sentence hammered in Jane's mind for the rest of the day. In the afternoon, taking advantage of Lucy having gone out to run errands at the bank, she did something she had never done before. She went to the master bedroom and started looking for clues. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, but her heart told her she needed to find something. In the ensuite bathroom, she cautiously opened the medicine cabinet. She found Mrs. Mendelssohn's usual medications, all prescribed by Dr. Reynolds, the family doctor for years. But at the back, behind some boxes, was a small unlabeled bottle. Inside, a clear, odorless liquid. Jane photographed the bottle with her old cell phone, careful to leave it exactly as it was. She continued her search and, in the drawer of Lucy's bedside table, she found a notebook with notes. As she flipped through it, her blood ran cold. There was a list of properties for sale in London and a note about consultations with a lawyer specializing in wills. On the next page, an underlined sentence. "Mental incapacity must be certified before any legal decision." Jane heard a noise at the front door. Quickly, she put everything back in its place and left the room, pretending she was just changing the bathroom towels. During dinner, Lucy seemed especially attentive to Mrs. Mendelssohn. "How are you feeling today, Mrs. Mendelssohn?" she asked, with a solicitude that sounded false to Jane's ears. "Tired," the elderly woman replied, unable to lift her eyes much from her plate. "And my stomach hurts." "It's your age," Lucy replied promptly. "Dr. Reynolds has already explained that your system is more sensitive. That's why we need to be careful with your diet." "But I've always had a strong stomach," Eleanor protested weakly. "Things change over time," Lucy cut in. Then, as if remembering something important, she softened her voice. "I made that special tea that always helps. Drink it before you go to sleep." Jane noticed that, unlike other days, today Lucy made a point of preparing the tea in front of everyone, using the common tea box from the kitchen. Was it because Philip was coming back? After Lucy went upstairs to put Mrs. Mendelssohn to bed, Jane took the opportunity to check the kitchen trash. At the bottom of the bin, partially hidden among other waste, she found a small package. She couldn't identify what it was, but the laboratory's name seemed foreign. She discreetly photographed it. That night, after everyone had retired, Jane lay awake in her room, looking at the photos she had taken. She wasn't a doctor or a pharmacist. She couldn't identify substances or medications, but she had a friend, Claire, who worked as a nursing technician at St. Teresa's Hospital. Maybe she could help. In the morning, on her way to the market, Jane made a detour and stopped by the hospital. Claire was at the end of her shift with dark circles under her eyes, but she agreed to look at the photos. "Do you have any idea what this could be?" Jane asked, showing the image of the unlabeled bottle. Claire frowned. "Without analysis, it's impossible to say. But from the discarded packaging—" She zoomed in on the image of the package in the trash. "This looks like some kind of potent sedative. It's not something you can buy without a prescription. Why are you showing me this?" Jane hesitated. She could trust Claire, they had known each other for years, but voicing her suspicions meant crossing a line that could change everything. "I'm worried about my employer. Mrs. Mendelssohn has been very confused, weak, with strange symptoms, and they seem to appear mainly after she drinks a special tea that her daughter-in-law prepares." Claire's eyes widened. "Jane, are you suggesting that—" "I don't know what I'm suggesting," Jane interrupted. "I just know that a lady who has always been lucid and strong now looks like a shadow of her former self. And it only started after the daughter-in-law moved in." Claire was silent for a moment, thoughtful. Some sedatives, in small but constant doses, can cause mental confusion, weakness, loss of balance, symptoms that could easily be attributed to old age. A chill ran down Jane's spine. "What do I do, Claire? If I'm wrong, I could lose my job. This family has supported me for 20 years. And what if you're right, and you do nothing?" The question hung in the air like a sentence. Jane knew she couldn't live with that doubt. Not after everything she had seen. "Her son is coming back tomorrow," she said finally. "I'll watch a little longer. Maybe I can get something more concrete." Upon returning to the manor house with her, market shopping, Jane found Lucy on the phone speaking in a low voice in the study. The door was ajar. "I already told you everything is under control," she was saying in an irritated tone. "When Philip gets here, he'll find his mother exactly as we expect. Yes, fragile enough to understand that she needs constant care and that this house is too big." Jane moved away silently, her heart hammering in her chest. At that moment she was certain. She had to act before it was too late for Mrs. Mendelssohn. Time was running out and there was much more at stake than just a job. The arrival of Dr. Paul Reynolds at the manor house that morning brought an unusual stir. Lucy greeted the doctor with a perfectly composed smile, leading him to Mrs. Mendelssohn's room as if she were the absolute mistress of that territory. Jane watched from a distance, pretending to arrange the potted plants in the hallway. "She's getting more and more fragile, Doctor," Lucy was saying, with a concern that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm afraid that when Philip arrives, he'll be frightened by his mother's condition." Dr. Reynolds, a grey-haired man with thick-rimmed glasses, nodded gravely. "It's the natural process, Lucy. Aging sometimes accelerates in certain phases." Jane took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Normally, she wouldn't interrupt a conversation between her employers and a visitor, but today was not a normal day. "Dr. Reynolds," she called, approaching, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'd like to speak with you about Mrs. Mendelssohn." Lucy shot her a cutting glare. "Jane, we're busy right now. The doctor came to examine Mrs. Mendelssohn, not to chat about her." "It's precisely about her health," Jane insisted, with a firmness that surprised herself. "I've worked here for 20 years and I've never seen Mrs. Mendelssohn decline so rapidly." The doctor adjusted his glasses, studying Jane with renewed interest. "What exactly have you noticed?" "Doctor," Lucy interrupted, "Jane is an excellent housekeeper, but she has no medical knowledge. Philip and I trust your diagnosis." Paul Reynolds raised a hand in a gesture that asked for patience. "Sometimes the person who lives with the patient daily notices details that might be missed in periodic consultations. Let's hear her out." Lucy crossed her arms, visibly annoyed, as Jane reported her observations. The accelerated weight loss, the mental confusion that came and went, the disproportionate weakness, the frequent dizziness, the fact that the symptoms seemed to worsen after meals or teas prepared by Lucy. "This is absurd," Lucy exploded when Jane finished. "Are you implying that I have something to do with Mrs. Mendelssohn's health, a woman of almost 80? The doctor remained impassive. "No one is accusing anyone, Lucy. These are legitimate observations, and it is my duty to investigate all possibilities." "Including fanciful ones," she retorted, her voice trembling with indignation. "This woman is clearly making things up." Dr. Reynolds turned to Jane. How long have you noticed this significant decline? It started about 6 months ago, but it has intensified in the last 2. It coincided with the period when Mr. Philip increased his work travel. The doctor nodded thoughtfully. I'm going to examine Mrs. Mendelssohn now. Alone, if you don't mind. Lucy opened her mouth to protest, but something in the doctor's gaze made her back down. Jane felt a flicker of hope grow in her chest. Perhaps finally, someone besides her was beginning to realize that something was not right. While the doctor examined Mrs. Mendelssohn, Jane returned to the kitchen to make coffee. Minutes later, Lucy stormed in. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, keeping her voice low so as not to be heard upstairs. 20 years in this house, and this is how you thank me? By making up absurd stories?" Jane faced her firmly. "I didn't make anything up, Mrs. Matthews. I only told what I've seen." "Well, you should know that Philip is going to hear about this behavior of yours, questioning the care I give my mother-in-law, me, who gave up my career to dedicate myself to this family." The mention of Philip made Jane's stomach clench. Losing her job would be devastating, especially at her age, but something stronger was driving her now. "Do what you think is best, Mrs. Matthews. I'm just worried about Mrs. Mendelssohn." Lucy's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Worry about your own future, Jane. People your age also have a hard time finding a job, you know." The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Before Jane could respond, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Dr. Reynolds was coming down, his expression grave. "Lucy, I'd like to run some additional tests on Mrs. Mendelssohn," he announced. "Specific blood tests." "More tests? But you did a full panel just a month ago." "Yes, but I want to check some specific enzymes, hormone levels, and—" He hesitated, as if choosing his words. "Possible toxins in her system." Lucy's face visibly paled. "Toxins? What nonsense is this?" "It's just protocol, Lucy, especially considering the speed of her deterioration. But Philip arrives tomorrow. He's going to be worried about more tests." "I'm sure your husband wants what's best for his mother," the doctor replied with surprising firmness. "I'll send a nurse tomorrow morning to collect the samples." After the doctor left, a tense silence fell over the manor house. Lucy locked herself in the study, making calls in a low voice while Jane went up to check on Mrs. Mendelssohn. The elderly woman was awake, staring fixedly at the ornate ceiling. "How are you feeling?" Jane asked softly. "He asked me many questions," Eleanor replied, her voice weak, "about what I eat, what I drink, who prepares my food, and he seemed so surprised by some of my answers." Jane sat on the edge of the bed. "Did you tell him about the tea?" Eleanor nodded. "I said that after I drink it, I get more confused, as if I'm floating outside my body." Her eyes welled up. "Jane, I'm scared. I don't know what's happening to me, but it's not just my age. I feel like I'm fading away." Those words broke Jane's heart. "Philip arrives tomorrow, Mrs. Mendelssohn. Everything will be cleared up." "I hope so. My son trusts Lucy too much. He always has." That night, Jane made a risky decision. Taking advantage of the fact that Lucy had gone out to buy something for Philip's special dinner, she took her phone and returned to the master bedroom. This time she wasn't just looking for clues, she was looking for proof. She opened the bathroom cabinet again and found the unlabeled bottle exactly where it had been before. With trembling hands, she held it up to the light. The clear liquid seemed harmless, but Jane knew that the worst things often hide under benign appearances. Taking a deep breath, she did something she never imagined she would do. She took a small empty vial she had brought from her pocket and transferred a small amount of the mysterious liquid into it. Immediately after, she returned to Lucy's drawer and photographed more pages of the notebook she had found. Now she could see it clearly. There were notes on the effects of substances, dosages, and even a disturbing list of expected symptoms: confusion, weakness, dizziness, loss of appetite. Her heart pounded when she heard the sound of keys at the front door. Quickly, she put everything back in its place and left the room, taking with her only the small vial with the sample. In the kitchen, she found Lucy putting away groceries, with a smile on her face she hadn't seen in weeks. "Philip just called. He arrives tomorrow at 10, she announced, seemingly having forgotten the earlier tension. "We're going to make a special lunch." "That's wonderful," Jane replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mrs. Mendelssohn will be very happy." "Yes, she misses her son," Lucy agreed, in a perfect performance of a devoted daughter-in-law. "But you know how hard it is for him to balance work and family. That's why I'm so grateful to have you here helping us, Jane." The abrupt change in behavior was disconcerting. Where was the woman who, just a few hours ago, had been subtly threatening her? "It's my job," she replied simply. "I'm going to go up and see if Mrs. Mendelssohn needs anything." "I've already taken care of it," Lucy said quickly. "She just had her tea and is resting. It's best not to disturb her now." Jane felt a chill run down her spine. "You gave her the tea now, so late?" "She was agitated with the news of Philip's return," Lucy explained, averting her gaze. "She needed to calm down to sleep well." That night, Jane barely slept. The small vial with the liquid was hidden at the bottom of her drawer, wrapped in a handkerchief. In the morning, before dawn, she headed again to St. Teresa's Hospital. Her friend Claire had managed to get in touch with someone at the lab who could analyze the sample discreetly and urgently. "What you're doing is very risky," Claire warned, receiving the vial. "If you're wrong—" "And if I'm right," Jane retorted, "I can't just stand by and watch." Claire promised to try to get preliminary results by the end of the afternoon. "But Jane, even with results, you'll need more. You'll need to catch this person in the act, you understand?" Jane nodded, a plan already forming in her mind. "Her son is coming back today. I'll try to talk to him before Lucy has a chance to manipulate him." Upon returning to the manor house, she found a frenzy of activity. Lucy had woken up early and was supervising the cleaning of the living room, the preparation of an elaborate lunch, and had even changed the flowers in the vases. "Put the best tablecloth on the dining room table," she instructed. "Philip likes everything to be impeccable when he returns from a trip." Jane obeyed, discreetly observing how nervous Lucy seemed, despite her permanent smile. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the photo frames on the shelf, and her gaze constantly checked the clock. At 9:30, Lucy went upstairs to help Mrs. Mendelssohn get ready to receive her son. When they came down half an hour later, Jane almost didn't recognize the elderly woman. Dressed with care, made up to hide her pallor, and with her hair perfectly styled, Mrs. Mendelssohn looked like an artificial version of herself. Her eyes, however, remained dull, as if a fog covered them. "Isn't she beautiful?" Lucy asked, guiding her mother-in-law to the armchair in the living room. "Philip will be so happy to see how well we're taking care of her." Jane noticed that Eleanor could barely sit upright in the armchair. Her eyes would close for moments at a time, as if she were fighting a deep sleep. Anyone who knew her would realize this was not normal. The sound of a car parking in the driveway sent Lucy rushing to the window. "It's him," she announced, nervously fixing her own hair. Philip Mendelssohn entered the house like a breath of fresh air. Tall, with an athletic build, despite his 45 years, he had the same expressive brown eyes as his mother. He hugged Lucy affectionately, then went straight to the armchair where Eleanor was sitting. "Mother," he exclaimed, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Then he stopped, frowning. He looked more closely at his mother's face, at her trembling hands, at her distant gaze. "Mother, are you all right?" "She's just emotional to see you," Lucy intervened quickly. "Aren't you, Mrs. Mendelssohn?" The elderly woman smiled weakly. "Philip, my son." Philip continued to study his mother's face, concern growing in his eyes. "You seem different." "It's age, dear," Lucy said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We talked about this on the phone, remember? Dr. Reynolds explained it's a natural process." Jane watched the scene from the living room entrance, her heart tight. The opportunity to speak with Philip alone seemed increasingly distant, as Lucy didn't leave his side for a moment. It was then that Jane's phone vibrated in her apron pocket, a message from Claire. "Preliminary results. Substance with compounds of potent sedatives and something else we are analyzing. Definitely not natural or harmless. Be careful." Jane clutched the phone in her hand. The confirmation she had feared and expected had arrived. Now she needed to find a way to show Philip the truth before it was too late for Mrs. Mendelssohn. Lunch proceeded in an atmosphere of false normality. Lucy served the dishes with a radiant smile, making small talk as if there were nothing wrong in the house. Philip, however, couldn't take his eyes off his mother. Mrs. Mendelssohn barely touched her food, her trembling hand dropping the fork several times. "Mother, you're eating very little," he observed, finally interrupting Lucy's monologue about the renovations she was planning for the garden. "She's been without an appetite," Lucy replied promptly. "It's normal at her age, the doctor already explained." Philip frowned. "You've lost a lot of weight since the last time I was here." "It's age, son," Eleanor murmured, her voice slurred. "Everything changes with time." Jane, who was serving dessert, noticed that these were the exact same words Lucy often used, as if the elderly woman had been trained to repeat that explanation. "I'm thinking of taking Mother to a specialist in London," Philip said, closely watching Lucy's reaction. "A renowned geriatrician a colleague recommended." Lucy's smile faltered for a second, but she quickly composed herself. "I think that's a great idea, dear, although Dr. Reynolds knows her. Entire history." "A second opinion never hurts," Philip insisted. "We can go next week." "Perhaps it's better to wait for the results of the new tests," Lucy suggested, helping herself to pudding. "Dr. Reynolds was here yesterday and ordered some tests." "New tests? You didn't tell me that." "I didn't want to worry you, love. They're just routine tests." Jane, clearing some plates, intervened discreetly. "The doctor mentioned something about checking for toxins in her system." Lucy's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Her eyes shot daggers at Jane. "Toxins?" Philip repeated, alarmed. "What kind of toxins?" Jane must have misunderstood, Lucy said with a forced laugh. "Dr. Reynolds talked about checking some bodily functions, not toxins." "No, ma'am," Jane insisted, gathering her courage. "The doctor used that specific word, toxins." A tense silence fell over the table. Mrs. Mendelssohn looked from one to the other, confused, while Philip seemed to be processing the information. Lucy quickly changed the subject, suggesting they have coffee on the veranda to enjoy the sunny Bath afternoon. Later, when Lucy went upstairs with Mrs. Mendelssohn to help her rest, Jane found Philip alone in the study, looking thoughtfully out the window. "Mr. Philip," she called softly, "may I speak with you in private?" He turned, surprised. "Of course, Jane, what is it?" She closed the door behind her, her heart beating fast. "It's about your mother. I'm very worried." "So am I," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "She's so different, so fragile." "It's not just her age, Mr. Philip," Jane said, deciding to get straight to the point. "Something is wrong, very wrong." Philip indicated a chair, inviting her to sit. "What do you mean?" Jane took a deep breath and began to recount everything she had observed in recent months. The sudden changes in Mrs. Mendelssohn's behavior, the dizziness that worsened after meals, the excessive control Lucy exerted over her mother-in-law's medication and food. "That's a very serious accusation," Philip said, after listening in silence. His face had hardened, but his eyes showed a painful confusion. "I know, sir. That's why I hesitated so much. But I can't stay silent any longer. Your mother is wasting away before my eyes." "Do you have any proof of what you're saying?" Jane hesitated. "I have observations, patterns, and—" She pulled her phone from her pocket, showing him the photos she had taken. The unlabeled bottle, Lucy's notes. Philip examined the images, his expression growing darker. "And what is this in the bottle?" "I'm not sure, but I collected a sample." She showed him the message from Claire. "My friend works in the hospital lab. The preliminary analysis detected potent sedatives, something that shouldn't be in any special tea." Philip's face turned pale. For a long moment he was silent, as if digesting the enormity of the suggestion. Finally he spoke, his voice controlled. "Are you accusing my partner of poisoning my mother?" "I'm asking you to investigate, to be vigilant, to protect Mrs. Mendelssohn until we are sure." He stood up, pacing the room. This is surreal, Jane. Lucy and I have been together for almost 5 years. She has always treated my mother with respect. I know it's hard to believe, Mr. Philip. It was hard for me to accept too, but the evidence is piling up. What evidence? Photos of an unidentified bottle? Notes that could be about anything? A preliminary analysis done unofficially? His voice trembled with disbelief. I need more than that to accuse the woman I love of something so monstrous. Jane felt desperation growing. You yourself noticed how different your mother is. This isn't normal. And why would Lucy be researching property sales in London without telling you? Why would she be writing notes about mental incapacity and legal procedures? That seemed to hit Philip like a punch. What? In her notes, there's research on how to transfer assets from people deemed mentally incompetent. Jane showed him more photos from the notebook. And there's mention of an estate agent in London. Philip examined the images more closely, his brow furrowing deeper. It could be a misunderstanding. I need to talk to Lucy about this. Please don't mention our conversation yet, Jane pleaded, suddenly alarmed. If I'm wrong, I offer 1,000 apologies and will accept the consequences. But if I'm right, I won't confront her directly, he promised, more serious now. I'll observe. Investigate on my own. And your mother? In the meantime? I'll keep an eye on her. I won't be leaving Bath anytime soon. When Jane left the study, she felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had planted the seed of doubt, but would it be enough? Philip loved Lucy, trusted her. Would he be able to see beyond the perfect facade she maintained? As she went up the stairs to check on Mrs. Mendelssohn, Jane froze. Lucy was standing in the hallway, staring at her. "What were you talking to Philip about?" she asked, with a sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. "I just asked if he wanted some coffee," Jane replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "He said he was going to rest a bit." Lucy took a step forward, invading Jane's personal space. "You know what's funny? I just made coffee for him and took it to the study, and you know what he told me? That you were in there talking to him about something very important." Jane's blood ran cold. Mr. Philip must have been confused. "I only asked about the coffee." "Don't lie to me," Lucy hissed, abandoning her sweet tone. "What are you plotting, Jane?" "Nothing, Mum. I'm just doing my job." "Your job doesn't include gossiping about me or this family." "I have never gossiped about you," Jane replied, gathering her courage. "I only worry about Mrs. Mendelssohn, as I always have." Lucy's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I'll be direct. I don't know what you said to Philip, but if you're trying to cause trouble between us, you will regret it. Do you understand?" The threat was clear. Jane nodded silently as Lucy walked away, descending the stairs with decisive steps. Trembling, Jane entered Mrs. Mendelssohn's room. The elderly woman was asleep, or seemed to be, her breathing irregular. On her bedside table, a half-empty cup with the remains of a dark liquid. Without a second thought, Jane took the cup and emptied its contents into another small vial she had brought with her. It was more evidence to collect. That night, Philip announced at dinner that he had decided to stay in Bath for 2 weeks, to spend time with his mother and take care of some pending matters. 2 weeks? Lucy repeated, unable to hide her surprise. "But what about your work in London?" "I can manage it remotely for a while," he replied, watching her carefully. "Besides, I want to be here for these new tests for Mother." An awkward silence fell over the table. Mrs. Mendelssohn, more lucid than she had been in weeks, smiled faintly. "That's wonderful, son," she murmured. "I've missed you so much." After dinner, Jane heard a muffled argument coming from the study. The voices of Philip and Lucy rose and fell like a tide of tension. Stray words reached the kitchen. Distrust, absurd, investigation, explanations. When Lucy left the study minutes later, her face was tense, her eyes red. She walked through the kitchen without looking at Jane and quickly went upstairs. Philip appeared shortly after, his expression grave. "Jane," he called softly. "I'm taking my mother to the hospital tomorrow morning for a full workup. I no longer trust the results that come through Dr. Reynolds. Did you tell her about our suspicions?" "Not directly, but I asked questions." "A lot of questions." He looked devastated. "The answers were not convincing." "And your mother, how is she?" "I'll sleep in the room next to hers tonight," he replied, his voice filled with determination. "I won't leave her alone for a minute." Jane felt an immense relief. Finally, someone with the power to change the situation was taking action. "You're doing the right thing," she said sincerely. Philip looked at her deeply. "If you're right, Jane, I can never thank you enough for speaking up, and if you're wrong—" He sighed heavily. "Well, some bridges can only be rebuilt with time." That night, Jane sent the photos of the new sample to Claire, along with a message detailing the latest events. The reply came quickly. "The lab detected the same compound in the first sample. They're doing a more detailed analysis. Be careful, Jane, this is bigger than we thought." In the middle of the night, a noise woke Jane. Cautiously leaving her room, she saw a faint light coming from the kitchen. She approached silently and found Lucy, using only the light from the open refrigerator, fiddling with small vials on the counter. She seemed agitated, almost frantic, transferring liquids from one container to another. Jane retreated slowly, returning to her room without a sound. With trembling hands, she took her phone and sent a message to Philip. "Lucy is in the kitchen, messing with suspicious vials. Be careful with anything she offers you both tomorrow." The reply came almost immediately. "Understood. Not sleeping. Watching. Thank you." The hours that followed were the longest of Jane's life. Lying in her bed, listening to the nocturnal sounds of the manor house, she prayed that the truth would finally come to light before it was too late for Mrs. Mendelssohn. Morning arrived with a golden light that illuminated the old contours of the manor house. Jane rose early, her body tired from a restless night, but her spirit alert. Upon entering the kitchen, she found Philip already awake, making coffee. "Good morning, Jane," he greeted her in a low voice. "I didn't want to wake anyone." "Did you get any sleep, Mr. Philip?" "Almost none," he admitted, running a hand over his tired face. "I was on guard all night." "I saw Mrs. Matthews in the kitchen during the night," Jane commented, moving closer. "Did you get my message?" "I did, and that's not all." He looked around, checking if they were truly alone, and then continued in an even lower voice. "After she went back to the bedroom, I started searching. I went through the study, the kitchen cabinets, until I found it." "Found what?" Philip pulled a small vial from his trouser pocket and placed it on the counter. This was hidden in a tea box at the back of the pantry. Jane examined the vial carefully. It had no label, just a symbol hand-drawn on the cap, a kind of stylized cross. "It looks like the same vial I saw in the ensuite bathroom," she murmured. "I also found this," Philip continued, taking a mobile phone that Jane had never seen before from his other pocket. A second phone belonging to Lucy. It was hidden in a false drawer in the desk. "A second phone? What for?" "Exactly what I asked myself." His eyes showed a mixture of pain and determination. "I managed to unlock it. The password was my date of birth." He let out a bitter laugh. "Ironic, isn't it?" "What did you find?" "Conversations. Lots of conversations with someone named Marcus." Philip pressed his lips into a thin line. "An estate agent. And also a lover." Jane felt herself turn pale. "A lover? They've been together for at least a year, planning a life in London after—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "After your mother was no longer here," Jane completed, a shiver running down her spine. Philip nodded, his eyes moist. "There are messages about how the process would be easier if Mother were declared mentally incompetent, how the house could be sold for an excellent price, how they could live comfortably on the money." The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Jane didn't know what to say. No words seemed adequate in the face of such betrayal. "And there's more," Philip continued, unlocking the phone and showing a series of messages. "Here she is, asking for information about substances that cause mental confusion and weakness, but are difficult to detect in common tests." "My God," Jane whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "There are also conversations with a doctor who isn't Dr. Reynolds, someone named Dr. Richard, who seems to have provided some kind of controlled medication without a prescription. That explains the unlabeled vial." Philip put the phone away, his movements calculated, as if each gesture required immense effort to maintain control. I called a private lab in Bath last night. They're sending someone to collect blood samples from my mother early this morning, discreetly. They'll also analyze the contents of this vial. What are you going to do now? Wait for concrete proof, he replied, his voice firm despite the evident pain in his eyes. And in the meantime, I'm not letting Lucy anywhere near my mother. At that moment, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Philip quickly hid the vial in his pocket and assumed a casual posture, fiddling with the coffee maker. Lucy entered the kitchen, impeccably dressed as always. Her smile was radiant, but there was a poorly concealed tension at the corners of her eyes. "Good morning, my loves," she greeted, approaching to kiss Philip on the cheek. He accepted the gesture without returning it. "Making coffee already? What a helpful husband I have." "I slept poorly," he replied simply. "Decided to get up and be useful. You seem tense, dear. Is everything all right?" "Just worried about my mother." He looked at her directly. "She seems to get worse every day." "It's her age," Lucy replied automatically, "as we've discussed so many times." "Is it really?" Philip kept his gaze fixed on her, and Jane realized he was testing his partner. "Yesterday she seemed quite confused after the tea you gave her." A flash of alarm crossed Lucy's eyes, so quickly it would have been imperceptible to anyone not paying attention. "Tea? Oh, the chamomile. It's calming, natural." "It didn't seem like chamomile," Philip insisted. "It had a different smell." "It must be because I mixed it with lemon balm," she replied promptly, turning to arrange cups in the cupboard. "Mrs. Mendelssohn has always liked that combination." "Strange," Philip murmured, still watching her. "I've never seen my mother drink that mixture before." Lucy turned around, her smile now visibly forced. "People's tastes change, dear, especially at her age." The atmosphere in the kitchen was so tense it could be cut with a knife. Jane pretended to be busy preparing breakfast, while discreetly observing the interaction between the couple. There was a new dynamic in the air, a dangerous game of cat and mouse. "I'm going to wake Mrs. Mendelssohn," Lucy announced after a few uncomfortable minutes. "She needs to take her medicine at the right time." "No need," Philip interrupted quickly. "I've already been to see her. She's sleeping soundly. Didn't the doctor say she needs to rest?" "Yes, but the medicine—" "I can give it to her when she wakes up," he insisted, pouring himself some coffee. "After all, I need to get more involved in my mother's care. I've been away too much." Lucy's lips tightened for a second. "As you wish. Just don't forget that each medication has its specific time." "I won't forget. By the way, where are her medicines kept? In the bathroom cabinet or in the kitchen?" In the ensuite bathroom cabinet," Lucy replied, hesitating. "Why do you ask?" "Just want to know where to find them when I need to," Philip said casually. "And that special tea? Where is it?" Lucy's fingers gripped the edge of the counter. "In the pantry, in a blue box. But I can prepare it myself when she wakes up." "That won't be necessary," Philip smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I want to learn how to make it, to help more." "Philip," Lucy began, changing tactics, her voice suddenly sweet and concerned. "You seem so strange today. Did something happen? Is it because of our conversation yesterday?" "Strange? No, I'm just thinking about my mother, about how to protect her better." The choice of the word protect did not go unnoticed. Lucy's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Protect her from what exactly? From time, from age, from people who might want to take advantage of her. Philip looked directly at her as he said the last sentence. A tense silence settled in the kitchen. Jane feigned total concentration on slicing fruit for breakfast, but her ears were tuned to every word. "I'm going to take a shower," Lucy finally announced, her voice controlled. "Then we can discuss these tests you want to do. I still think it's unnecessary, but if it will put your mind at ease." As soon as she left, Philip and Jane exchanged significant looks. "She's suspicious," Jane murmured. "That's what I'm hoping for," he replied, checking his phone. "The lab technician arrives in an hour. We need to keep Lucy away from Mother until then." The morning dragged on slowly. Philip managed to convince Lucy to go into Central Bath to buy some items he supposedly needed urgently. Meanwhile, the lab technician arrived discreetly through. the back of the manor house, and collected blood samples from Mrs. Mendelssohn, who remained in a worryingly semi-conscious state. "How long until we have the results?" Philip asked the young technician as he walked him to the back door. "For a basic analysis, a few hours. For a full toxicology report, maybe a day or two," he replied, carefully storing the blood tubes. But the lab director promised top priority, considering the circumstances. "And the contents of the vial?" "That's quicker. We should have a preliminary result by the end of the afternoon." When Lucy returned, she found Philip in his mother's room, sitting in an armchair by the bed, reading a book aloud. The scene seemed to touch something within her as she hesitated at the door, her face softening for a moment. "You've always been a good son," she commented, entering the room with the shopping bag still in her hand. "Mrs. Mendelssohn was lucky." "Not that lucky," he replied, without looking up from the book. "A good son would have been more present, wouldn't have left his mother vulnerable." Lucy placed the bags on the floor and approached the bed. "She seems to be sleeping well. What did Dr. Reynolds say about these periods of deep sleep? I haven't spoken to Paul yet, but I'm worried she can barely stay awake for more than an hour." "As I said, it's her age." "Please," Philip interrupted, closing the book with force. "Stop repeating that like a mantra. This isn't normal, Lucy, and you know it." The air between them became electric. Lucy studied her partner for a long moment, as if trying to decipher how much he knew or suspected. "What exactly are you implying, Philip?" "I'm not implying anything," he replied, rising from the armchair. "I'm waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For the truth," he said simply. "One way or another it always comes out, doesn't it?" Before Lucy could answer, Philip's phone rang. It was the lab. He answered, listening intently, his face growing graver with each passing second. When he hung up, his eyes were as cold as Jane had ever seen them. "That was the lab," he announced, his voice controlled despite the evident tension. "Preliminary analysis of the vial I found in the pantry." Lucy turned, visibly pale. "What vial? What are you talking about?" Philip ignored the question. "Do you know what they found? A mixture of benzodiazepines in a concentration far above safe levels, combined with other compounds they are still identifying. In other words, a sedative potent enough to knock out a horse, mixed with God knows what." "I don't know what vial you're talking about," Lucy insisted, taking a step back. "Someone must have planted it to frame me. Probably your housekeeper, who has always hated me." "My housekeeper?" Philip let out a humorless laugh. "Jane has worked for this family for 20 years. You arrived 3 years ago, and it was only after you came to live here that my mother started to age rapidly, as you like to put it. This is absurd. What are you accusing me of, exactly? Of taking care of your mother when you weren't here? Of slowly poisoning my mother so she would be declared incompetent, so we could sell this house, so you could run off with your lover to London?" Lucy's face transformed into a mask of shock. "What are you talking about?" In response, Philip pulled her second mobile phone from his pocket. "This phone, these conversations with Marcus, these plans for when my mother was no longer in the way." The mask of shock gave way to something colder, more calculated. Lucy's eyes hardened and she straightened her shoulders. "You went through my things," she said in an accusatory tone. "Yes, after Jane showed me the evidence of what you were doing to my mother." "Evidence?" Lucy let out a bitter laugh. "Photos of some random vial? Accusations from a jealous housekeeper? Is that what you base your trust in me on, after 5 years together?" "No," Philip replied, moving closer to her. "I base it on your own words, on your research about how to slowly incapacitate someone, on your plans with Marcus." The repeated mention of her lover's name seemed to finally break something inside Lucy. Her posture changed, her shoulders slumped, and a weary sigh escaped her lips. "You don't understand," she murmured, almost to herself. "You never understood." "Then explain it to me. Explain why my mother is in this bed, barely able to recognize her own son." Lucy looked at Mrs. Mendelssohn, still asleep, and then back at Philip. In her eyes, a coldness he had never seen before. "You want to know? Yes, I put sedatives in her tea. Yes, I wanted Her to be declared incompetent. But I never wanted to kill her, if that's what you're thinking. I just wanted freedom. The confession, so direct, so cold, fell like a bomb in the room. Philip took a step back, as if he had been physically struck. Freedom? You call this freedom? You don't know what it's like, Lucy continued, her voice now filled with bitterness. To be trapped in this old house, caring for an old woman who looks at me like I'm an intruder, married to a man who is never around. Years of my life wasted while you traveled, built your career, and I stayed here, buried alive. No one forced you to do anything, Philip retorted, his voice trembling with anger. You could have asked for a divorce. You could have left. And lose everything? Lucy's laugh was as cold as ice. Lose years of investment? No, Philip, I deserved more. I deserved compensation for my lost time. So you decided to sacrifice my mother for your deserving. Lucy shrugged, a gesture of indifference that shocked Philip even more than her words. She's lived her life. She's had her joys, her achievements. Now she's just taking up space, consuming resources. Her eyes fixed on Philip's, defiant. How many times did you yourself complain about the cost of her medical care? About the time it took to manage the assets? It was a practical solution for everyone. Practical? Philip advanced, his face contorted with fury. You're talking about my mother. I'm talking about a woman of almost 80 who no longer contributes anything but expenses, Lucy replied, impassive. The plan was simple. Have her declared incompetent, take over the management of the assets, sell this crumbling house, buy a smaller flat for her in some decent institution, and use the rest to start a new life. No one would have been harmed. No one except the woman you were slowly poisoning. Don't be dramatic, Lucy cut in. She was confused, but she wasn't suffering. The sedatives were just to accelerate a process that was already happening naturally. Philip shook his head, incredulous at the coldness of this woman he thought he knew. And Marcus? How long? A subtle smile touched Lucy's lips. Almost a year. He understands me. Understands my dreams, my ambitions. He doesn't tie me down to a mediocre life in a provincial town. And why didn't you just leave with him from the start? Because I need to secure my future, she replied with brutal honesty. You're wealthy, Philip. This house, your family's investments. I deserved a share of that for the time I invested in this marriage, and Marcus agreed it was only fair. The silence that followed was deafening. Philip looked at his sleeping mother, then back at Lucy, as if seeing for the first time who she really was. I'm calling the police, he finally announced. What you've done is a crime. Do it, Lucy challenged, crossing her arms. And I'll deny everything. I'll say you planted the vial, that you're trying to frame me because you found out about Marcus and want revenge. Without a recorded confession, it'll be your word against mine. It was then that the bedroom door swung fully open. Jane was standing there, holding a mobile phone in her hand, her face a mixture of triumph and disgust. The problem, Mrs. Matthews, the housekeeper said, her voice firm, is that we do have a recorded confession. Every word you've said since Mr. Philip mentioned the call from the lab. Lucy's eyes widened in shock as the reality of the situation finally hit her with full force. 3 weeks had passed since Lucy left the Mendelssohn Manor House. The winter of the rolling countryside was beginning to give way to the first signs of spring, with a few stubborn flowers blooming in the well-tended garden. Inside the house, a new atmosphere had settled, lighter, more serene, as if the air itself could finally circulate freely through the old rooms. On the back veranda, sheltered from the cool morning wind, Mrs. Mendelssohn was sitting in her favorite chair. Wrapped in a colorful woolen shawl, she watched the birds in the garden with a gaze that, day by day, was regaining its former vivacity. Beside her on the wicker table, a cup of authentic tea exuded its comforting aroma. I brought some cornbread muffins, Jane announced, approaching with a tray. Fresh from the oven. Eleanor smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face. You spoil me too much, Jane. You deserve it, the housekeeper replied, placing the tray on the table. Besides, you need to regain the weight you lost. In the days following the confrontation with Lucy, Mrs. Mendelssohn's recovery had surprised everyone. The toxicology tests had confirmed the presence of potent sedatives in her system, along with substances that affected her balance and mental clarity. But once the administration of these compounds was stopped, the elderly woman's body slowly began to rid itself of the poison. "Philip called," Jane informed her, sitting in the chair beside her. "He said he'll be here for lunch. He's bringing that pudding you like from the bakery downtown." "That boy is overdoing it with the spoiling," Eleanor commented, but her tone was one of pure affection. "Since the incident, he barely goes back to London." Jane nodded, observing how the elderly woman seemed stronger each day. Her cheeks, once hollow, were beginning to regain their color. Her hands, though still a bit shaky, could now hold a cup without spilling. And most importantly, her lucidity had returned, with only occasional episodes of confusion. "He blames himself," Jane said softly, "for not noticing sooner." "It wasn't his fault," Eleanor retorted firmly. "Lucy was convincing. She knew how to manipulate everyone." The mention of Lucy's name still brought an uncomfortable silence. After the confrontation, she had left the manor house escorted by police, after Philip formally filed a complaint. The evidence was overwhelming. The recording of the confession, the analysis results of the substances found in the house and in Mrs. Mendelssohn's system, the messages on the secret mobile phone, the testimony of the doctor who had supplied the controlled drugs. "The hearing is next week, isn't it?" Eleanor asked after a moment. "Yes," Jane confirmed. "Mr. Philip asked me to remind you, but he said you don't have to attend if you don't feel up to it." "I'm going," Eleanor declared, with surprising determination. "I want to look her in the eye. I want her to see that she didn't manage to destroy me." Jane smiled, admiring the strength of this woman who, weeks ago, had seemed on the brink of collapse. The doctors had explained that the effects of the sedatives, though severe, were largely reversible. The body, especially in old age, could be fragile, but it also possessed a surprising capacity for regeneration when freed from toxic agents. "You never told me how you started to suspect," Jane commented. "When you realized something wasn't right." Eleanor set down her cup, thoughtful. "It was small things at first. Moments of lucidity when I noticed objects out of place, drawers open that I was sure I had closed, then the strange taste in the tea and the food, the way I felt worse after the meals Lucy prepared." She sighed. "The hardest part was doubting my own mind. When you start to distrust your perceptions, your senses, it's like losing your footing." "That's why it took me so long to act," Jane admitted, feeling the weight of guilt. "I saw the signs, but I thought, what if it's just her age? What if I'm imagining things?" "Don't blame yourself." Eleanor touched the housekeeper's hand affectionately. "You were the only one who really paid attention. The only one who cared enough to investigate, even when you were afraid of the consequences." In the living room, the old grandfather clock announced 10 o'clock with its deep chimes. A cool breeze stirred the leaves of the trees in the garden, carrying the scent of the season's first flowers. "Do you know what hurts me the most?" Eleanor continued, her gaze lost on the horizon of the hills. "It's thinking about how much Philip is suffering. He really loved her. He trusted her." "He's a strong man," Jane said. "He'll get over it with time." "Yes, but some scars never completely disappear." The sound of a car parking in the main driveway interrupted their conversation. Minutes later, Philip appeared on the veranda, carrying a package from the bakery and a bouquet of fresh flowers. "Look who's here early," Eleanor exclaimed, breaking into a radiant smile. "The meeting in London ended sooner than expected," he explained, leaning down to kiss his mother's forehead. "And I couldn't wait to get back." Philip placed the package and flowers on the table and pulled up a chair, joining the two women. At 45, he was still an attractive man, but the last few weeks had left visible marks, small worry lines around his eyes, a few grey hairs that weren't there before. "How are you feeling today, Mother?" he asked, studying her attentively. "Better every day," she replied, raising her cup in an imaginary toast. "Dr. Reynolds said my tests are almost back to normal." "Thank God," Philip murmured, visibly relieved. "And you, my son? How are you?" The question, seemingly simple, carried an implicit weight that all three understood. Philip hesitated before answering, moving forward, one day at a time. An understanding silence hung between them. No one needed to mention Lucy directly to feel her shadow still present in the subtext of their conversations, in the pauses, in their glances. "I spoke with the lawyer this morning," Philip commented, changing the subject slightly. "He's confident about the case. The evidence is irrefutable." "I still can't believe she confessed everything like that," Jane said, shaking her head. "It was as if a mask had fallen off." "She never imagined she was being recorded," Philip replied. "And deep down, I think she wanted someone to find out." There was a morbid pride in the way she explained her plan, as if she wanted recognition for her ingenuity. "People like that often underestimate others," Eleanor observed. "They think they're smarter than everyone else. That's what happened with Lucy. She saw me only as a frail old woman, you as an easily manipulated absent husband, and Jane as a simple, unimportant housekeeper. But it was precisely this simple housekeeper who unmasked the whole scheme," Philip completed, casting a look of deep gratitude at Jane. "I only did what any decent person would do," she replied, embarrassed by the recognition. "I couldn't just stand by and watch Mrs. Mendelssohn waste away like that." "You risked your job, your security," Philip insisted, "and for that we will be eternally grateful." Jane smiled, touched by the sincerity in his words. In the weeks following the incident, her relationship with the Mendelssohn family had transformed. What was once a purely professional bond, though respectful, now carried a genuine affection, a complicity forged in adversity. "Have you decided what you're going to do with the house?" she asked after a moment. "We're keeping it, of course," Eleanor replied promptly. "This place has been in the Mendelssohn family for over a century. It has history, it has a soul, and it has far too much space for just 2 people, Philip added with a smile. 2.5 people, Eleanor corrected, winking at Jane. "Don't forget that our heroine practically lives here." Jane laughed, feeling welcomed as never before. "It's true, I spend more time here than in my own flat." "About that," Philip began, exchanging a knowing look with his mother. "We have a proposal for you, Jane." "A proposal?" "Philip and I have talked a lot in recent weeks," Eleanor explained, straightening up in her chair. "About the future, about this house, about our lives, from now on. And we've come to the conclusion that it makes no sense for you to keep paying rent when we have so many empty rooms here," Philip completed. "What? Are you suggesting I move in here?" Jane asked, incredulous. "Exactly," Eleanor confirmed. "The suite at the end of the hall has a wonderful view of the garden. It would be perfect for you." But that's not proper," Jane protested, though her heart warmed at the idea. "I'm the housekeeper." "You were the housekeeper," Philip corrected gently. "Now you're much more than that. You're part of the family." Jane's eyes filled with tears. At 53, after a life of hard work and dedication, she had never imagined being treated as an equal by her employers. It was an honor she could barely process. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, emotional. "Say yes," Eleanor encouraged. "After all, who's going to take care of the 2 of us? Philip is always traveling, and I still need someone around, at least for now." "It's a selfish proposal on our part, really," Philip joked. "We want to keep you close." "In that case," Jane replied, wiping away a stubborn tear, "I think I can accept, but on one condition." "What's that?" "That you let me continue cooking. I can't imagine sitting around with my hands idle in this house." Philip and Eleanor laughed, relieved. "That is more than acceptable," the elderly woman assured her. "Your food is the best part of the day." The 3 of them raised their cups in an impromptu toast, sealing this new family arrangement that none of them could have foreseen months earlier. Later, after lunch, Jane found Mrs. Mendelssohn at the old piano in the living room, softly stroking the yellowed keys. The melody, though simple, carried an emotion that seemed to fill the entire house. "I haven't played since I fell ill," the elderly woman commented, noticing Jane's presence. "My hands are still a bit shaky, but I'm relearning." "It's a beautiful melody," Jane said, approaching. "I'd never heard you play before." "Lucy didn't like it," Eleanor explained, with a sad smile. "She said the sound bothered her, that it was old-fashioned. Over time, I just stopped." It was another small freedom that had been stolen, another part of herself that Eleanor had sacrificed without realizing. But now, note by note, she was reclaiming not only the piano but her own identity. "You know," the elderly woman continued, still playing softly, "there's a lesson in all of this, about trusting our instincts, about listening to that little inner voice we sometimes try to silence." Jane nodded, understanding perfectly. She too had ignored her instincts for too long, torn between professional duty and genuine concern. "Experience teaches us," she agreed, "but sometimes the price is too high." "The important thing is that we're all here," Eleanor replied, ending the melody with a soft chord. "We survived, and now we can start over." In the spacious living room of the old manor house, bathed in the golden afternoon light streaming through the tall windows, that word, restarting, seemed to echo like a promise. Not a return to the past, but the building of a new present, founded not on fear or mistrust, but on hard-won truth. Outside, the garden bloomed with the first colors of spring. Inside, a family newly forged in adversity was learning to trust again, to smile without reservation, to see beauty even after the storm. And in the old kitchen, where so many silent dramas had unfolded, preparations for dinner were underway in an atmosphere of renewed tranquility. There were no more cups with suspicious liquids, no watchful glances, no words laden with double meanings. Only the comforting aroma of a true home, where each person could simply be who they were, without fear. The Mendelssohn Manor House, which for so long had been the stage for a silent destruction, now witnessed the daily miracle of reconstruction. Not just of walls or furniture, but of trust, of bonds, of dreams. A home, after all, is not made just of bricks and mortar, but of the affection that inhabits its spaces, the stories that echo in its halls, the hands that reach out to one another when the path seems uncertain, and as the sun slowly set behind the Bath Hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, life in the manor house continued on its renewed course. One day at a time, one note at a time, one smile at a time. To restart, they all discovered, was not to erase the past, but to transform it into a foundation for a wiser, stronger, more authentic future. And in that, perhaps, lay the true victory over those who tried to destroy what they never understood. That some bonds, even when tested by the harshest trials, have the power not only to endure, but to flourish with a strength that no poison, however potent, could ever annihilate. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Eleanor, Philip, and Jane has touched your hearts. To continue experiencing emotions like this, we have a special playlist with other incredible stories that explore the complexities of family relationships and the strength we find in the most difficult moments. Find it by clicking the link to the side. If this narrative of overcoming and restarting resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Every day we bring unique stories that make us reflect on life, love, and courage. Tell us in the comments if you've ever witnessed situations where trust and intuition were crucial to protecting someone you love. Your experience could inspire many other people.